The year is 2023. We had been shown one of the most dominant showings from a team in F1, with Red Bull winning 21 of the 22 races, Max Verstappen winning 19 of those races, and setting a new record winning 10 races in a row, winning the Drivers' Championship by 219 points, and winning the Constructors' Championship with his points alone. So, in a season dominated by Bulls, who do you bring in to sort them out? This is the 2023 Singapore Grand Prix. So this story actually starts off with the practice sessions, as this was the first glimpses we got that something was a little bit wrong with the Red Bulls, as in no session Verstappen looked anywhere the quickest, not being able to top FP1, 2 or 3, with a fastest lap of 1 minute 32.378. So this led to quite a few discussions on the track about what Red Bull's pace could be, and Red Bull had discussions saying that they were not the fastest car here. However, considering the year we had had, it was a little hard to believe them. A lot of people thought they were just sandbagging and they would be back to their form in qualifying. And straight away, George Russell is complaining over the radio. Some things never change, and this time it was about Max Verstappen, which, you know, he never complains about. But timing wise, the track had really started to grip up, with cars going faster and faster, with Yuki Tsunoda going into provisional pole position. However, just as we were getting to the climax of the session, this happened.
Stroll is currently last and he's hanging on to that Aston Martin as he approaches the final corners of the 3 miles. Gasly goes, oh, he's going to put it in the wall. Big crash on board with Lance Stroll.
Funnily enough, this meant going into Q2, Tsunoda had the fastest lap of everyone, but sadly for Oscar Piastri, it meant that he couldn't set a good lap in time, meaning he was knocked out already in 17th. Then moving on to Q2, and we were really shown just how close the pack was here, with the provisional top 10 being within 5.5 tenths of each other, with Verstappen and Perez only 10th and 11th. The Red Bull pace was alarming. And with Perez spinning on his final chance, meaning he was not going any faster, he was out of Q2, it was all up to Verstappen to continue Red Bull into the top 10.
Max Verstappen stays in 10th position, and we're looking now to who can improve. One Red Bull is out. Gasly does not take the opportunity to demote Verstappen. How about Liam Lawson? Can Liam Lawson make it through? He can! Liam Lawson knocks out Max Verstappen!
But it was like something out of a movie. Liam Lawson knocked Max Verstappen out of qualifying. Liam Lawson, the driver in the sister team, leading to Red Bull not being in the Q3 session for the first time in almost 5 years. So Red Bull were really not lying about how bad their pace was in Singapore. Meaning now, this was a scramble for pole position. It was anyone's game. And with Mercedes looking fast, McLaren looking fast in Norris, and both Ferraris looking very fast as well, it really was a 5-way battle to see where you would start on Sunday. And bear in mind, this is Singapore, so it was very important to get ahead of your competitors. So going into the final moments of Q3, Sainz sat provisional pole with Charles Leclerc second, with Lando Norris third. Both Mercedes didn't have the best of first laps, however, we knew they had pace, so they were still in it. After an incredible lap from Carlos Sainz, he managed to out-qualify George Russell by the skin of his teeth, with Charles Leclerc in 3rd place, Lando Norris in 4th, with Lewis Hamilton in 5th. And the top 4 were all separated by 3 tenths. It really was anyone's game. Let the race begin. 5 red lights and away we go. With Sainz having a brilliant launch, followed closely behind his teammate, getting the jump on George Russell up into turn 1. As further back, Norris had a pretty poor start, so nothing really new there, being overtaken by Hamilton. But then Hamilton got squeezed wide by his teammate George Russell, rejoining the track ahead of his teammate. With all of this squabbling, it also meant Ferrari in the 1-2 were able to get an early lead on the first lap. Further down the grid, Kevin Magnussen, trying to make up for his poor start at the start of the Grand Prix, went for a very ambitious move on Esteban Ocon. Tsunoda went to see some of the sights of Singapore before being the first retirement, and then come lap 2, Hamilton was ordered to give back the position to George Russell. So it was safe to say the race went off to quite a hectic start. However, It is a street circuit, so it wouldn't last very long. So it really matters being ahead of your competitors and not getting stuck in any trains or just behind slower cars. And that is desperately what Verstappen had to do if he wanted to continue his race wins. But sadly for him, he could only get up to 9th, which was a good start for him, but it then meant he was behind Kevin Magnussen and Esteban Ocon, who were in much slower cars, who would be able to back him off from the front pack. So Verstappen, lap after lap, would have to eat away at Kevin Magnussen, getting him eventually on lap 5. However, he just could not get past Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso. But in good old-fashioned street circuit fashion, no one could get past anyone, with a whopping 2 overtakes happening in between lap 2 and lap 20. One of them being the one I mentioned, with Verstappen getting past Magnussen, and the other with Lando Norris overtaking Lewis Hamilton on lap 3. So come to the end of lap 20, this is the first time we would start seeing people coming into the pits. Sadly for Logan Sargent, he must have heard his team telling him to hit into a wall instead of pit, as that is exactly what he did, bringing out the safety car. Meaning, all of the front runners, mainly everyone in the pack, had to go in for pits. It was the only reasonable thing to do. However, that meant for Ferrari, they would have to potentially double stack, with Carlos Sainz heading into the pits. Charles Leclerc, as slowly as possible, entered the pits, which I'm sure gave every Ferrari fan a slight chill down their back. However, for the first part, Ferrari got it spot on, with this gap being plenty of time to get Carlos Sainz in pit, let him exit, and have Charles Leclerc come in. However, they didn't get the second part right, giving Charles Leclerc a pretty slow pit stop, and with Russell and Norris so close behind, Russell jumped up to a net P2, with Norris into a net P3, and Leclerc all the way down to a net P4. Lap 23, and this is when the safety car would come in. And after a very good start from Carlos Sainz, he had no issues with Verstappen behind him. However, Verstappen and Perez decided not to pit, hoping that they would get Verstappen into the lead of the race and be able to bunch the field up. This didn't really work out, and on those old tyres, they were dropping like flies. With Russell getting past Verstappen and Norris getting past Perez, all on lap 23. By the way, Charles Leclerc didn't have the best of starts, meaning that Lewis Hamilton got past him as well. Leclerc was really not having a good time up to this point. Coming over to the next lap, Lewis Hamilton would then overtake Perez, with Norris also overtaking Verstappen. But crucially, Russell was showing just how much pace he had, being only 7 tenths behind the race leader Carlos Sainz. Lap 27, Hamilton gets past Verstappen. And then the race calms down a bit again. 10 laps go by, and the best action we are shown is between Perez, Alonso and Ocon, with Alonso losing a space to Ocon, who had been having an incredible race so far. But lap after lap, you could just see that it wasn't going to happen overtake-wise, and the only way you could do it is if you had a massive tyre advantage to the car in front. As we'd seen, it'd been 10 laps and Russell was still a second behind Sainz, with Norris a second behind Russell, with Hamilton behind Norris, and Leclerc behind Hamilton, all within about a second of each other. It was just a massive train up front. But, you know how I mentioned Esteban Ocon was having the race of his life? Well, sadly for him, in true Alpine fashion, reliability was their downfall, and Esteban Ocon had to stop his car at the side of the road, right at the pit exit. Meaning, all that hard work to get up to P6 now meant nothing. It was a real shame, as he was very frustrated with this. But, crucially, this now meant the virtual safety car came out. Now, with only 17 laps left, most teams decided it was best to stick it out, keep their track positions as it had been so hard to overtake, and go to the end. That's what Ferrari and McLaren did. However, Mercedes saw it different. Mercedes double-stacked Russell and Hamilton, got them on a new set of medium tyres and decided to hunt them down. And it really became a whole cat and mouse scenario. Could they catch up to both Ferraris and the McLaren of Norris in time? Well, lap 47. Verstappen overtakes Zhou for 10th to get back into the top 10. It was a very nice overtake. Lap 53. Carlos Sainz still had a comfortable 1.5 second gap to Norris. However, the Mercedes now had caught Leclerc and showed just how good that tyre advantage really is around Singapore, with Russell getting past him on lap 53 and Hamilton a lap later on lap 54. And at the pace the Mercedes were going, they would catch Carlos Sainz before the end of the race. So Carlos Sainz had to get very strategic with how he was going to play this. He knew the McLarens weren't the fastest in the straight line, and he knew he could take advantage of this, potentially keeping Lando Norris in that 1 second bay as a sort of shield. Give him DRS, Don't let George Russell by and try to hold up the Mercedes. And that is exactly what he did. Oh, and in other news, Verstappen had found his way all the way back up to P6. What a recovery drive considering what they were like at Singapore. And even though he wasn't leading the race, that is such a championship drive to still get up into the top 6. But moving back to the front, and it was getting tense. It got to that point where Russell and Hamilton were right behind Norris. And at times, it was less than a tenth separating them. They were going side by side. It really was now or never for Mercedes. But Norris, with that extra little help of DRS and Carlos Sainz playing along, meant that he could just keep the Mercedes where he wanted them to be. And if Sainz could do this for just a few more laps, he would be safe. And so coming into lap 62, George Russell needed the lap of a lifetime to get past Norris and Carlos Sainz. And he definitely gave us a lap to remember, but probably not for something he would want. Now, one of my favourite things about this crash is actually when you look back on the replay, it just shows how much in the zone the drivers get. When you're behind a car, you follow their line, see what they're doing. And if you can notice, Norris's tyre actually hits the wall as well. So it very easily could have been Norris crashing out with George Russell as well. That would have been a catastrophe. But it just goes to show that Mercedes was just a bit too weak and the tyre went and George Russell is out of the race. Meaning now the top 3 was Carlos Sainz, Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton behind. Crucially, very much taking off the pressure, meaning Carlos Sainz could ease his way to the finish line, coming in first place for the 2023 Singapore Grand Prix. And I mean, it had to be him, didn't it? The son of a rally driver whose nickname is El Matador had just slain the Bulls and took the one and only non-Red Bull win that whole season, showing the most brilliant racing IQ we've seen for a long time. But soak it in, Carlos Sainz, breaking Verstappen's winning streak, not buckling under the pressure, and George Russell crashing out on the final lap. I'm sure this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, right?